Gene Decode spent more than 20 years serving on the US Navy in 5 different classes of submarines. He's also a very skilled martial artist with over 40 years experience. And he had an epiphany in 1990 when he learned about the existence of a deep state cabal that was satanic in orientation. He has been using his remote viewing skills and psychic abilities to be able to come up with information about what is really happening in the world. And he is an expert on deep underground military bases and what is occurring at these bases around the world. And he's here today to give us some of the latest updates on the Earth Alliance operations to clean up our planet of the satanic deep state influence, and is also very familiar with attacks that recently occurred at Area 51 on the moon, and also what is really happening in Iran. Well, welcome, Gene, to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Saul. It's an honor to be back. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had you on about, I don't know, I think it's been half a dozen times now, but there's always new people, and it's always worth just maybe giving people a little bit of your background. And I'm very interested in how, I guess, at the end of your Navy service, after 20 plus years, you learned about the existence of this worldwide satanic cabal, and you had your epiphany, and I think you had an out-of-body experience where you met with God, I guess. So, yeah, you want to explain all of that?
Sure. So, started in, actually, it was during my military service. I had my third submarine I was on was a spec op boat where we did spec ops. So we did what they would normally call a northern wedding. But the briefing, they brief the families and the crew together, and then the ship pulls out and they brief the crew in increments. And so, like E4s and down, they have a confidential clearance, and then you'd have a secret clearance for certain people, top secret. And I went into the wardroom for the top secret clearance briefing, and there was a spook, what we call a spook, which is a CIA guy there riding the ship. And he had, before we pulled out, had me direct my division I was in charge of at that time to load equipment on the submarine and attach it to the submarine, which the stuff we were attaching is stuff that a submarine shouldn't have attached to it. And I was questioning him, and he just said, well, it's for the operation. I said, yeah, but, and he said, he just put his finger to his lips, keep quiet. In other words, I go, okay. So then same thing after the briefing in the wardroom. Then he took me, the captain, and the weapons officer and aside, and we got our own separate briefing, and I had to sign some things that, I had been given a higher clearance. And then after that briefing, he followed me out of the wardroom, and we went up into a passageway between radio and sonar, and he took me aside and he said, "This is only for you. You don't tell anyone else about this." And I'm like, "What? I don't tell the captain?" He goes, "No, he doesn't have clearance or need to know." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, and he said, sometimes you'll talk to the senior radioman and get information, but you don't share this with him, and he has the same thing. So I go, okay, he has things he doesn't share with you. I said, okay, he'll just hand you messages. Okay, I got it. So then he went to what looked like a linoleum wall. The passageway has like the coverings on the stainless steel wall, and touched it, and a plexiglass slid out of it. I'm like, clear plexiglass with a map of the world. I'm like, what? It's like, I didn't know that's in there. Has that been in there all this time? I've been here for like a long year or so. I don't remember this. So then he was, he knocked on radio, said, "This is what you'll do." And a hand came out with message traffic. I recognized the arm as the senior radioman. and handed the message traffic, and he said, you'll plot this every day at this time. And I look at it, and I know what I'm looking at. I know, Charlie to Whiskey, Foxtrot, all the different Soviet submarine names and all this. This was in the Soviet era. This was like 1978. And so I'm looking at this, 79 and 80 in that time frame. And so I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is like, I know how many submarines they have, and this is like all of them. I'm like, and then there's Chinese submarines. I'm plotting every submarine on Earth, and I know where ours are. And so I'm like, if we know where theirs are, they obviously know where ours are. So this Cold War thing is a total farce, because we're supposed to be the most clandestine part of the U.S. military, and they know everything about us. And, that then went on later into more things of the operation that didn't meet eye to eye. And he finally just took me aside and he said, don't ask me questions anymore. You'll figure it out. I know I've seen your file. You're brilliant. You'll figure this out. You have certain abilities, and it'll come to you in time. Just don't worry about it now. Just do the op, okay? And I had all this equipment. He had me install that I had to like put all kinds of different data into, and positions and different things, and cause certain things to happen on the gear that was bolted to the submarine. And I'm just like, it was so bizarre. And, that's why I was asking questions. And he got to the point, he said, I can't answer that. And some of your questions, I don't know the answer to anyway. So I'm like, oh, I see. So the briefing you gave me is this, you had a higher briefing, and then whoever briefed you had a higher clearance and all that. So I figured it out. But then in my final tour, which was in Pearl Harbor, I had that, and I sat with that, and I researched that, and I found, like, for example, that Kissinger had given the Soviets hundreds of lathes to mill out their gimbal assemblies on their missiles for their and other things for their nuclear missiles, because they were not accurate. They could not make bearings accurate enough, so that the missile was kind of more like a V2 missile in World War II, where the NAZIs would give about the right amount of fuel and the right angle and the right direction, and hope it hit something in London. Kind of what their missiles were. So he sold them. He had sold to them a series of lathes that could mill out the correct level of a very, very accurate bearing, so that they could put those in their missiles, and their missiles would now be a viable threat. So, it would be, before with the Cold War, their threat of nuclear war was not really very accurate, of being able to hit cities and stuff. So this would make it so it was accurate. And I'm like, yeah, this fits what I learned. And then, I kept researching. And then finally in 1990, in August of 1990, we're pretty close to the exact date. I had I had tried to go up for the next rank I made the first rank, the rank I retired at, in 8.5 years, which was never done before. And so then I tried the rest of my career, and I couldn't make rank. And I was like, what in the heck? And it was like, at one point I overheard when they were going through the selections for the next person, they were going and they pulled up my military folder and, my records, and said, no, put that on, that's coded on the note, put it on the no-go pile. So they actually put a code in your service jacket that if you're not to be ranked, because I've been asking questions I shouldn't be asking, and I'm a risk, so they wouldn't advance me anymore. So I figured, okay. And then I was asked by the CO as I was coming up to retirement, what I thought about my tour there. They always do that as you're retiring and, leaving the military kind of thing. And I said it's the most interesting one of all, because, I had by that time arrived at the conclusion that, about the satanic deep state. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, I started asking him certain questions like, what's the Federal Reserve? And, he acted like he didn't know. And I'm like, how can a captain not know these things? That's impossible. He said, well, I don't. And so then I said, I'll put together a jacket of information. So I sent it through the guard mail, jacket of things like Operation Vampire Killer and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it came back to me. And then the guy that was in charge of me told me to keep my mouth shut and that I would not tell people anything anymore. And so I said, you can't tell me to do that off base when I'm out of uniform. On base or in uniform, yes, but not off base. And he said, that's not from me. That's from the CO. So he had obviously got told certain things. So that more than verified what I had already know that from my epiphany, because when I couldn't make rank and we were leaving that day when they did the last time I could go up for it, either that or I'd have to re-enlist. And I had been told not to bother to try to re-enlist because I was a dinosaur and they didn't want people like me to stay in. The dark side was making the military dark. And so I figured that out, obviously. But, and I had that, what happened was I was leaving the command with the guy that was in charge of me, and I was, asking him about why he made rank, because he was, he had poor evals, had all kinds of nefarious things he was involved in, and I couldn't understand it. So he said, well, and he was an African American. I said, is it because you're African American? And he said, in my case, yes. But I said, okay. So because they have a quota of how many African American, different ethnicities to get the right percentage in the military at that time. So there was another command that there was a guy that made the rank above him. And I had talked when I worked out in the gym every day to all the guys that worked for him. And they really disliked him. The morale in that division was terrible. And then on top of that, I asked him, he must know a lot because he made the rank, and he said, no, he's an idiot. So I asked the guy I'm walking with, my boss, do you know this guy? And he goes, yeah, is that why he made it? Because he was African American too. And he said, no, he's a Mason. Well, I had never heard that term on this earth. I have had all my life dreams of antimatter earth, and we don't even say that. I'm in the resistance in that world, in the underground. I was. Now that world's getting freedom. It's tied in, quantumly tied to this world. So I was told that you don't even say that word, Mason. So I'd never heard it on this earth, strangely enough. You'd think you'd hear something common like that. But so then I started, when he said that, it felt like, a bucket of ice water, because on the antimatter world, that's a word of terror. So that then immediately started, I asked him what it was, and he said, it's an African-American group, And I'm like, well, that's the opposite antimatter world, because there it's, an Aryan thing. So maybe it's switched here. So then I went to a lady I was trying to, in a business I was working with, and asked her, and she said, that's not the real question. She said, what's the Federal Reserve? And, I went down that rabbit hole because I was like, what does that have to do with it? And so she gave me a list of things to look up. And in the process of doing that, of trying to prove what I thought was impossible to be in this world, I proved it was way worse than what I thought. And then I eventually took a bunch of my students in martial arts aside and told them to prove me wrong. And they actually proved it true as well. So that's kind of how I wound up knowing about all of that, and over the years and researching it. And then I was always very outdoor oriented too, so I always had experiences. Like I did a lot of free climbing in Hawaii and in Puerto Rico. I climb up waterfalls and cliffs and all that stuff because I was born from a very young age, 2-3 years old, climbing and rock climbing and all that, and had climbed quite a few things, really severe kind of things by the time I was 8. So after about time I was 15, I was free climbing things. So in Hawaii, I took one of my students and we free climbed Kaina Point up to the top of Kaina Point. And we get up there and an Army Jeep comes up, and there's 2 Marines in there, and they put their weapons on us and say, what are you doing here? Climbing. He goes, how'd you get here? Climbing. He goes, you didn't climb up the whole 1,000 feet of cliff with nothing but your hands. And yeah, that's how you climb. He's like, yeah, right. So you can't be up here. This is a top secret facility. I'm like, what an idiot. I didn't say it, but you don't tell somebody that, So, I found out later it's a tracking facility for spacecraft and things like that. So he took me down and dropped us off and took us off the base and dropped us off. So that was part of the process of waking up. And so then also, and when we started to climb Kaina Point, there's a huge tunnel there with a huge grate over it. It's part of the original lava tube system, but it's big enough that you could drive 3 semis into it side by side. It is huge, and it's higher than that. It's probably the wingspan of a 767 on its end, perpendicular. So that goes underneath the entire island of Oahu, and then there's another tunnel system that goes up underneath it. And the Princess's Palace, actually, the way the stairs go through from one side to the other are symbolic of that. And that's how King Kamehameha was recognized as a god in Hawaii, because he used to go from one side of the island to the other faster than you could row around the thing or run over the pass. And so they thought he was a god, but he just went through the tunnel, because he knew that stuff. The elites always know those things. So anyway, there's some history.
Yeah, well, fascinating history there, Gene. So just to summarize it for my audience, because I think this is very important, you served for like 20 plus years in the US Navy. In your first 7 years, you progressed at record pace up to a fairly senior rank in the Navy. But then for the last 15 years or so, you didn't get the next rank because you were too smart and too competent, and you asked too many questions about these guys, or that you knew about these guys. This is the kind of like satanic influence, and you were asking questions, learning about that. And so that was something that they, one, you were asking questions about the control that these guys had over the planet or in the United States. And second, I guess you were just too smart and too ethical, and they don't like that. They want people promoted to these senior ranks who are easily corruptible and kind of like not all that smart, so they could be easily fooled by these people who are part of this kind of like satanic cabal.
Yeah, actually, the ethical part is the big part, because the first time I was able to go up for that next rank, just at that point, I had a new guy come on board, and they told me I would keep him up. You have to qualify in submarines, and so they said he would only get one patrol to qualify. And I said, no, he gets the same as everybody else. And they said, no, you're going to keep, and that's what it'll happen. And I said, no. And they said, okay, then also we want you to keep him awake until he makes a mistake, and then take him to captain's mast, and we'll bust him, and just keep doing that over and over until we bust him out of the Navy with a dishonorable discharge. And I said, why? What's he done? He goes, that's none of your business. You'll do that if you want to make rank again. And I'm like, I need to know why. That's against standard operating procedures. Everything you're telling me is against everything that's in the military, all the orders and directives and everything we have. And I'm not going to do that unless I know why. And they said, that's how it was. So then at that point, that's when they knew that I wouldn't do what it takes to make rank, regardless of morality of it. I would do something immoral and wrong just to make rank. So the big part is the morality.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that about the military, that you can reach a pretty senior rank, but progression to those very top ranks, those very senior leadership ranks, I mean, you have to be someone that can be easily corrupted. That people that are too ethical, they just don't get promoted. And I've heard that happen for people like colonels. Like, they don't make general because they are too ethical, and what they want instead are generals or admirals who are easily corrupted.
Yes, and they actually, at the next time my evaluations came up, they dropped my evals for no reason at all, so I couldn't make rank. And then, I told it, I'm the person that was in charge. I said, why? And I asked why, and he said, because you wouldn't do things. And so I said, you can't do that. And he said, we are doing it. Sign it. And I said, if I sign this, I'll guarantee you don't make rank either, because I work for you, and all the other people like me at my level of rank will stand against you in the entire department. And that did happen, because they saw that they're going to be possibly railroaded as well. That was when you had good people in. So he wound up not making rank and having got a discharge, because the second time up as an officer, if you get advanced, you're out. So that did happen, but because the other divisions within his department went against him, and all the different different things like Mark 48 certs and TREs and NTPIs and all of those things came up. They all went against him, so he didn't get advanced and he got out. So, and then other things happened where he kind of went up against me directly when I made a call on something that was safety of the ship, but I set it over the wrong mics, so it went throughout the entire ship, and I was supposed to only go to the main operating areas, because if I hadn't have done that, the ship would have been in a situation where we would have been hit by a huge container ship. We are coming up to periscope depth, and so that was against orders, standing operating procedures orders. And when I did that, he said, he was going to take me out and all that, and he disqualified me from the standing watch and all that. And then the captain came out and said, called him in, had him replaced, and called him into his thing and me into his wardroom, and said, you do not go against his judgment if it means the safety of the ship. If he hadn't have made that call, the ship would have been destroyed and we'd all be dead. You do not do that. Sometimes you have to know what to do at the right moment, regardless of procedures. Sometimes the procedures have to be sidestepped. So, he didn't like me anyway. So he said, that's why I dropped your evals. I go, no, that's not it. It's what I call the test, where they test you for morality or immorality.
Has that changed? I mean, is the military under Trump and Pete Hegseth, have they changed that, or is it still the influence of this satanic deep state in the military is still strong?
Actually, that's how they're cleaning it up. From my understanding is they look for people that have been put a situation where they're kind of normal or advanced, and they came up to a certain point and they were given the test and they passed the test. They did something immoral. So they're going through officers, all the way up to flag officers, 4 stars, all of that, looking if they have things that they've done that are immoral, that are known. And then they also will put a test in front of them if there's a question, we want you to do this, something that's immoral. And they say, I'm not going to do that. Then they have an idea that the person may be a good person. But if they say, yeah, sure, and they go, okay. And then they also have where they put out some information. This is a standard way when you think somebody's leaking to the enemy. You put out some information to a certain amount of people. And you do this 3 or 4 times, so you're weeding out who's the traitor. So you'll have, say, groups A through, say, 1 through 10 people there, high-level people. And you put out a secret, some high-level classified information, but it's not real. So then you find it's been leaked to the enemy. Okay, it's one of those 10. So the next time you have 5 of those 10, and it's 5 new people, or just 5 of those 10 in another situation, and you weed it down to who's the traitor, or who are the traitors. And so that's how they've when Pete Hegseth and Trump called all of the high-ranking people to that briefing, a lot of them didn't leave there. They were put in under custody and taken to various sundry places, as they call it, get mode. There are other places too. There's quite a few other places they take, because Gitmo's kind of full. So they especially if it's really high level stuff they've leaked, if it's Space Force stuff they've leaked, they're taken off world. So in that case, but there's a facility that's kind of 18% of the time it sees this. It 18. We don't see all the more than half the surface of the moon is seen over an 18-year period. So there's a part of the moon that doesn't see the Earth most of the time, but once in a while it does, and that facilities on that side that only gets to see the Earth once in a while, and so they take them to that facility there. So when they came in, a lot of those people were arrested, and we got central casting, as Trump keeps saying, central casting, central casting. Look at this, this General so-and-so, they couldn't do better than that. That's central casting for you. And so you also have some people that have been replaced by hybrids. So an example would be Xavier Buchanan, who is in charge of, I think it was, I can't remember, I'm sorry. But he was put in charge of an area because it needed to be cleaned up, and a whole lot of things need to be done. And he's known as Dr. X, like in the X-Men, because he has this ability, because he's a hybrid, where whatever he wants you to think, you'll leave that briefing thinking that, and he'll know what you're thinking. If you're able to get around that, he's telepathic. He can also do mental mind influencing, direct mind to mind influencing. So he has those abilities, and so probably can't remember it because they don't want me to remember it. But he's in charge of a facility area because he's sent there to clean it up and to take over certain things and to get certain things done.
Well, I wanted to switch over now to one of the things that this satanic global cabal has been trying to do, which is to create or escalate the war in Ukraine to becoming a world war. And one of the things that they've been doing is that they've been getting their assets in Europe, in the NATO countries, to cooperate with the Ukrainians in building these drone factories and producing thousands of drones that are sent to Ukraine and are then used in the war against Russia to attack Russian cities and civilian targets and so forth. So what do you know about that, and what's the likelihood that could lead to Russia retaliating, using whether it's conventional weapons or even atomic weapons against these drone factories in Europe, producing thousands of drones for the Ukrainians?
Yes, so I've been told that the facilities are in the UK, in France, and in Germany, and so it's 70% probable, is what I've got, that the Russians will strike those drone facilities, possibly with tactical nukes. So big enough to take out the facility, but not to go beyond that. In other words, nothing that would take out a huge city like London or something, but take out the facility in its entirety, including the bunker underneath. If you hit it with an Oreshnik, you wouldn't even need a warhead, because the kinetic energy from it coming in at hypersonic speed will penetrate the bunker anyway and destroy it. So, but a small tactical nuke, once it penetrates, then that would work, like what they did in Operation Epic Fury with the facility in Iran, how they took that out. It was a series of very control charges and shape charges and all kinds of techniques that they now have to take out deep bunkers and underground facilities. So this is the same kind of thing. So if they do that, then what the timeline is, and they know this, they've gamed it out with their and also with their chronovisor, what people call the looking glass. They've seen how it plays out, is that we'll get to a black swan event, a near-death event, a near nuclear war, where the U.S., China, all the nuclear powers will go right to the edge to attacking, and back and forth, depending on alliances, uh, to loose, and then it'll get very, very close, but it will not go there. And it really couldn't go there anyway. I'm aware of this from, as I was retiring, when they the non-terrestrials disarmed all the nukes on Earth back in 1992. So a 1990 to 1992 timeframe. I just knew the submarines were pulling into Fort Island in Hawaii and offloading their ICBMs. And I'm like, what? So they had done that worldwide because we were going to go to nuclear war. So they turned, what I was told, they would turn all the warheads, the uranium, into gold, or the plutonium, or both. Because they said, you like gold? Okay, here you go. They transmuted it. So this is the same situation here. We really couldn't go to nuclear war because they're not going to let us blow up the Earth. We've had our hiding site saved a few times. There was a Russian facility that got taken into dark hands, and the general was spinning it up, the missile there. And the non-terrestrials came in, and the Federation came in and froze everybody, and made it so they couldn't do that. So this is the same kind of thing. We'll get very, very, very close, but I mean closer than we actually probably did in the Cuban Missile Crisis, which got within a few seconds of a nuclear launch, because there was a Soviet submarine and they were getting ready to launch because they had lost communications, and they were right off the coast of Cuba. And so they were, the only thing that stopped it was that the executive officer wouldn't turn his key. It takes, on a nuclear warhead, it takes two people. It's one of the jobs I used to have during Battle Stations Missile. I do the warhead part, and the other person would be 2 decks below me, and I go 1, 2, tube 1, 1, 2, 3, turn, tube 5, go down, 1, 2, 3, turn. And you turn, when you get your package to launch, you don't know if it's real or if it's just a exercise on submarines. And so it's the same thing on this submarine. He said, okay, sir, turn your key. And it was the KGB officer. I think it took 3 keys in this case, the executive officer and the XO, and he would not turn the key. If he had turned the key, they could have launched a nuclear torpedo at some U.S. ships, and that would have been it. So it was literally a few seconds off, kind of like in the movie Sum of All Fears, where it got very, very close and then they wouldn't do it. And that's why we've seen several times where Trump picks Nascent Dorma, which was, when they went around and executed everybody, that was the music that was playing, all the deep state guys.
Right. So the scenario that we're facing now in the next few weeks or months is that Russia is very highly likely, almost certain likely, to attack these drone factories in these major cities in Europe, London, Berlin, France, wherever they're producing these drones that are being shipped to Ukraine or secretly shipped so that they can attack Russian cities. The Russians are going to blow these facilities up, these factories up, using either tactical nuclear weapons or their very powerful Oreshnik missiles, and that'll plunge everything into this kind of Cuban-like missile crisis where the world is on the verge of a nuclear war, because Britain and France have nuclear weapons, but extraterrestrials or non-terrestrials, as you refer to them, they're like going to make sure that we don't get to that. So is that pretty much the way it's going to play out over the next few months?
Well, that's the safeguard, is the non-terrestrials to make sure it can't go to that. But additionally, Trump will come in and save the day, kind of like the soldiers coming over the hill at the last moment, like in Lord of the Rings. All the Rohirrim come up over the hill in the last moment and save the day, So it's like, right, as Helm's Deep is getting ready to fall, the Rohirrim comes to the rescue and the wizard comes up. And so Trump, being the wizard, will come up at the top of the hill on his white horse and, okay, save the day, and it's not going to happen. And okay, and then all the stuff, a lot of stuff will come out from that. election fraud of the AWeb stuff. The 111 countries that are in that election fraud stuff now of the AWeb, the Association of World Economic Bodies, election bodies. Sorry, and so that fraud plus the fraud from the Venezuelan thing of the 72 countries that have had their elections taken, and then that'll will also dovetail into the disclosure, as well as the disclosure of the Epstein stuff. It will all come tied together, which will then bring about, as the disclosure comes out, that'll bring about technologies and things to be able to come out along with the election fraud and what's been going on. And that'll reveal the deep state, and it all ties together. Everything ties together.
Okay. Now, one of the things that really is confusing for a lot of people is that on the one hand, you've got like the US and France and Britain helping Ukraine, and Ukraine is being used in this as a proxy to attack Russia, and that's all part of this deep state agenda cabal. But on the other hand, Trump and Putin and President Xi of China are part of the Earth Alliance, and they're cooperating. So do you want to kind of like unpack that for people, because that can be very confusing?
Yeah, so it is for the average person to understand it. It seems to be impossible. You have where it looks like, just like the Cold War, it looks like the Russians and us are on opposite sides. And, Ukraine's being used as a proxy by the US and NATO and the UK to try to destroy Russia and break it up into 10 pieces, is what they were saying. That's also was the plans for the US too, with the deep state, was to break it up into 10 pieces. And so that goes to the Bible and why they want to do that. It ties to the Armageddon line and the book of Revelations and those things. So in this case, it looks like that. But behind the scenes in the space, the secret space area, same thing back during Kennedy. They were working, Gorbachev and Kennedy were working hand in hand together. And this is the same thing that is going on now, where you've got, like at Green Mountain, where you have all the TR-3s and other craft, even much bigger craft than that. They're in the hundreds, and you'll have where they will come down with a whole lot of people to be trained on how to pilot these ships, and they'll all separate out to go to various ships where a non-terrestrial, usually a Nordic, is standing, that will train them in how to link with their minds, because the ships are controlled by the mind. So if those, the speed that you need things to react, you have to have it at that level. You can't go from mind to hand. So it has to be direct mind link up with the ship, and so it takes a special person that has that ability. And so they teach the people, the pilots that are the people that are the pilot, they're going to be the pilots, to do that. But these people are not just U.S. Space Force, U.S. Air Force, U.S. military. They're Russian, they're Chinese, they're French, German, you name it. They're from all over the world. And this, if you're looking at that and you're knowing the political situation on Earth, it's like, what? So that's pretty much been the situation for a long time now, and you had the deep space, you had the black hats doing the same thing, but now the white hats are in that same situation because they've cleaned it up since 1987, when they got the mind wipe stuff from the Fourth, Fifth Reich people. The scientists were able to get their memories back, and they've taken over, and created Solar Warden and taken over the fleets and all of that stuff. So now it's all changed to where they're cleaning out the deep state entirely, and you still have the same alliances. They're just on the white hat side now.
You mentioned Green Mountain, and I think that's something that is of great interest to me. I actually just did a webinar on Green Mountain with JP and Michael from Conflict Radio, where they shared what they knew about Green Mountain. So what do you know about Green Mountain and what's underneath there? You mentioned TR3B, so yeah, can you elaborate? When was the Green Mountain base? Well, who created it? Who initially, put in the resources in there, and what's happening there today?
Well, the first thing to know, as far as Green Mountain is near Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. That's the first thing to know, and that was starting to be put into a underground facility in 1954. Starting in April, there was contracts and things that went out to build that out. I'm sure I think you did that on Redacted. You showed those articles. Right. Yeah. And then, however, that underground huge tunnel system, I mean, it's huge in there. You've got hundreds of TR3s and other things in there, hundreds. It's massive, and it goes all the way up and connects just 6.66 miles. They love that number. To Redstone Arsenal, with huge caverns and tunnels, underground natural tunnels and things that were there, and also things that are ancient. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years old, that go from Eglin Air Force Base all the way up to where Colossus is in Tennessee, and then goes over to Florida. And so this is a huge ancient underground civilization that was there in the I think it's more likely in the millions of years old. And so this is just that the U.S. military Space Force going in there, and the U.S. military and various, back then it was the dark side was going in there in 54, but now it's in the white hats' hands, and building up and building out and what was already there. So that's why when you go from Eglin Air Force Base up to Green Mountain, you go underneath Crestville, and that's where Gates, I think he's a senator, was told that they have hybrids there. And so because that's part of the facility, that whole thing all the way from that part of Florida, and it goes off into the Bermuda area and all the way up into Tennessee, as I was saying, makes a huge triangle of underground facilities and stuff that is an ancient underground civilization is down there. So it's into huge ancient technologies that are now being activated, and they're learning how to use the technologies. It's what Trump said, we don't even know how to use some of the stuff, the technology we have. That's why, because it's not ours that we're finding. It's not something developed by the U.S. Military or the current military industrial complex. They're learning how to use it. So this is what is part of what Green Mountain is.
Now, how deep are these ancient underground caverns, tunnels, these bases? I mean, some people have mentioned miles deep, and I was just speaking to a Huntsville scientist, or an ex-scientist from Huntsville, and he was of the opinion that once you get to 5 miles deep, that the Earth's temperature is too hot to build a base, that it's like hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit, and you just couldn't do it. And that's the conventional physics or the conventional geological understanding of the Earth, that as you go deep, as you get down to like 5 miles, 10 miles and so forth, then it's too hot to have bases. So, but we've heard, and I know you've talked about a lot of bases that are like around 10 miles deep. So how's that possible?
Okay, well, first of all, with the technology that they use for the craft, like the TR3s that can go faster than light, because they can get to Ganymede, for example, in an hour or two, probably just 1 hour. a technology that makes you so you can bend space and time around you so that you're in your own space folded area. So you could have a base literally in the lava of the mantle of the Earth, and it would not be harmed. However, the heat, most of the bases are, depending on their location, are 5 or 10 kilometers deep. And that's because the conventional view of the Earth is not correct. It's actually inside where the Agarthans are and the Shimbalans and some other areas, and the one area in Antarctica where they were allowed to go inside the hollow Earth, the NAC ice, during World War II. And they set up New Schwabenland inside a mountain, but inside they do have an island inside the Earth too that they're on. And so they have maps of the inner Earth, and they went in there. And Admiral Byrd flew inside the Earth twice, inside the hollow Earth. So you have the Earth's crust, which is 800 miles, and in between that and inside the hollow Earth, halfway down, 400 miles, is about, depending on the area, is the mantle. It's the liquid rock area. It's not liquid in the center. It's liquid in between the center and the outside of the Earth. So the temperatures and the things that they say are not accurate. So even at the 400 mile in certain areas, as you get down towards that rock, you've got certain things sometimes that seem to defy the physics, where you've got this blue ice, for example, that is very highly charged and powerful. And above that is these black rocks that they're now picking up off the bottom of the deep trenches like Marianas Trench that create oxygen. They separate the water and create oxygen. And high level, they're very high level magnetic. I mean, so high that the size of probably the little tiny battery that you'd have in your of an iPhone or something would lift a 747 if you had it. So they are actually catching neutrinos and things and spinning them inside them because of their high power energy. And so what that does is it allows to open up portals and all kinds of things. So they're mining these black rocks in the deep underground facilities that are way down. So some of these facilities are near 400 miles down, because they want to they're drilling down there to get to the black rock and to the blue ice. And now they found this. This is the conspiracy of this. I have to say this is a theory, okay? Because I don't want to say things that are going to get certain things here. Anyway. That
right.
They're trying to get this serpentine blue rock and this blue goo that is sentient, and it's taking out some of the dark side dumps.
Now that's very interesting because it matches what Radu Cinema wrote in his books, the Transylvania Sunrise series of books, where he said that the geology, conventional geology, has it wrong, that the conventional understanding that as you go deeper into the Earth, as you go underground, it gets hotter and hotter, and you hit this kind of like molten core, and temperatures are unbearably hot and all of that's wrong. That in fact, as you go deeper into the Earth, what happens is that you reach higher and higher densities, not temperatures, but densities. So you go, 5 miles, 10 miles, 100 miles, 500 miles, 1,000. You're going deeper into densities, and it's all about your frequency. That if you're a fifth density being, it's easy for you to kind of go down to those depths. But if you're like at the third density, then you can't go. And I don't know, maybe heat becomes a factor or something.
Yes, it's things get very, very dense, like the black rocks, the blue ice. And those things. So it's the energy contained. Yeah, if you equate energy to heat, yes, but it's not down there at that density. It's like when you take down to the bottom, like the Trieste down to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. You can't bring those up because the fact that every 100 feet is 33 pounds per square inch increase as you go down in the oceans. So if you're saying you're 28,000 feet down, the pressure is so immense that anything that was organic would be brought up, would explode, and a lot even of the rocks and things would explode because they're under that pressure. And if they're not under that pressure, then they're going to decompose or come apart, depending on what they are. And if you're talking something, that is unable to withstand the inversion of the pressure, then it's going to explode. If it's like something that's the ice or something along that level, from what you're saying is all I'm saying. It may be able, due to the energy structure of it, if it's sentient, definitely it would be able to withstand that. But anyway, the structure of the Earth is, that's why, they did not have a problem with the NAC ice going into inner Earth, because they, at their density they were in World War II, they don't have the ability to go in those areas. They can't.
It makes sense. What do you know of this operation? Apparently there was an operation, a white hat operation on July 26th. I've heard it from different sources. And one of those operations involved clearing out Area 51 of some deep state, some Nazi influences, and that there was firefights there, and that this wildfire that was reported by local news networks in the Area 51, around Area 51, that actually was just a cover for the attacks and the battles that were happening at Area 51, where the White Hats and the Earth Alliance took out some of these deep state cabal assets.
Yes, a lot of it was due to the chimeras. I always pronounced that wrong, but they were taking out those facilities that were by the NACIs and the deep state working together in those areas, and they're cleaning it up. So they're cleaning up Area 51 and taking that out. And that's why the cover of the Nevada wildfires. Also, because when they cleaned out the base that's just south in New Mexico, I can't remember it now. My goodness, too early in the day for me. This is early for me. Is the base that's just off the coast, the border of Colorado, down in New Mexico. They cleaned that out, and they had wildfires in the same area, because as the creatures get out, you need something to contain them. So that's a containment technique as well, to contain some of the chimeras that might get out in the cleanup. So that's also a cover. So it's not an area you can easily get in this case, in Area 51, but it's to keep people prying eyes that all these assets are going in there. Oh, we have wildfire, that's why we have to send these assets in there. So it's to clean up that, and you had 17 earthquakes in that area at 10 kilometers, cleaning that up, which is pretty obvious comms, to put it mildly.
Well, yeah, definitely something happened in Area 51, and apparently there was a retaliation the very next day or two, where the moon was attacked. And so we're going to come back in the second part of this interview with Gene Decode, and we're going to jump right into these reports about the moon being attacked, and that was some kind of retaliation for this white hat operation that cleansed out Area 51 and other parts of the planet.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.